All right, it is time. Everybody can hear me okay? I presume my
Yep, I can hear you.
Yes.
my
Yes.
I can hear
internet's
Hannes's background noise as well.
well, I had to turn my video off because my internet is being a little challenging today, so I apologize for that. That said, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the first Teep session that we're meeting in. So if you're expecting some other topic, you may be in the wrong session, but we will be discussing our progress for the trusted execution environment and provisioning. Hopefully by now you are all familiar with the note well. So in the interest of time, I will just move on. With respect to the meeting tips, again, I think given that it's late in the day for most of you on Thursday, not the first day, I'm presuming you're familiar with the etiquette and some of the tips for using the Meet Echo. Let's get to the agenda bash. So thank you, Hannes and Mike, for being the note takers. I know that Dave, I don't know that I see Brendan. Oh, I do see Brendan. Wasn't sure where you wanted to put this. Go ahead, Dave.
I say Brendan. The request for Brendan's slot is tomorrow. Is for tomorrow's session.
Okay, great.
So that assumes that Brendan can be there tomorrow, which I think Brendan confirmed that he can be there tomorrow. So it'd be at the end after the completion of the Teep protocol stuff tomorrow.
Okay, great. Which is where I put him in the agenda. And I forgot to upload the updated version, but this is the agenda for today anyway. So any modifications to the agenda for today? If not, going once, going twice. Dave, I think you are up first with the architecture. So do you want me to share or do you want to share? I uploaded it.
Why don't you do it?
Okay.
If you need me to, I can, but I'm happy with you doing it. So. All right, so first up is the architecture. Let me turn on my camera here. All right, so architecture document. Next slide, please. All right, so just as a reminder, this has already gone through working group last call, and previous IETFs, we already addressed all of the issues from working group last call. And then since last IETF, we've had 4 simple editorial issues that got raised, and so I will talk about those briefly. And then TIRU did a Doc Shepherd review and submitted to the IESG. The assumption is that these are all trivial editorial things that can be addressed as part of AD review or even as part of IETF last call. There's no technical issues here. So let's go on. I'm going to walk through each of these so you can see the quantity of the changes. So the changes are as follows. And so this is already, actually all of these are already in the version that was submitted to the IESG. And so we're just gonna tell you what we did. And there's one issue left that we'll get to at the end. So this one was about making it clear that TLS could terminate inside the TE in some cases. And so what was added is the parentheses S on the left to make it clear that HTTP, including TLS, is sort of inside that block. And you can see in Model C, that whole block is inside the TEE. And so that was sufficient to resolve that one. So we just added the parentheses S to make it clear that you could terminate TLS in there in Model C. So I'm just going to keep going unless somebody has a question, because I think all of these are fairly simple. So keep going. Next slide. So the next one was the change shown there, changing from red to green. And you can see that the green stuff has symmetry between the top 2 lines. You can see authenticating the Teep agent from the TAM on the far right of the first line. And the second line is authenticating the TAM from the Teep agent, right? And so changing that provides the symmetry. the main point is that the TAM is authenticating the Teep message sender, not the TEE per se, in terms of the Teep messages. And so this is what was intended in the text, but the table had a arguably bad label, and so we changed the label to match the discussion text around the figure. So that resolves a point of ambiguity or clarity. So next slide. I mean, the technical points are already addressed in the surrounding text. So, all right. And so then I don't know if Hannes, you want to say anything about this one, but Hannes had some people do a review and rewrote the last paragraph of the data protection security considerations section to be clearer, based on the feedback from the readers. And so the intent is that the new text says the same as the old text, but in a more clear fashion. And I don't have anything else to say about this one unless Hannes wants to speak up and say anything else about it. But you can see the intent is that this is purely editorial.
Yeah, no, I don't think it needs some further explanation. Yeah.
Go on. That's the one that's actually the largest number of changes, is that slide right there. So, but we don't think there's anything that's not simple editorial that's in there when the editors reviewed it. So it looks good. So next. And this is the last one that's already in there, is previously the document used the term certificate chain. And if you look in the security terminology RFC 4949, it says you shouldn't use the term certificate chain anymore. You should use certificate path instead. So great, we just did the search and replace, and now it uses the term certificate path instead every place. So just simple search and replace. So that's it. That's the set of changes that were done since last time. And again, these 4 changes are in the copy that was submitted to the IESG. Next slide.
Okay.
This is the only one that is not in there. And so Hannes filed this one, and so I'll let you speak to it if you want, but the issue had to do with, should we define the term software update in the terminology section? So there is a pull request that does this and so on. The other editors have decided to not merge this, and so that's the proposed resolution. We just want to confirm working group consensus before we close the issue, which is the only time that software update as a term appears anywhere in the document, it's in the introduction, and there's the quoted part in the introduction. The terminology is way after that, okay? And so when Ming and I looked at this, we said, okay, the term software update in bold there is clear enough in context. You don't need to define it, especially defining it in a later section doesn't really help anything. And so that was our rationale for not merging this pull request. It's just the only one that's sitting there is open, and Ming and I would propose we close this one as no change, but we're willing to listen if anybody in the working group has different opinions. So. If we don't hear any comments, then we will accept it as the accepted resolution. But this is your opportunity to object.
I think Hannes wanted to say something.
Yeah. I think I made our proposed text based on the discussion. I think it was Daniel who raised some of the questions. That's why I made the change. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's borderline. It's not really necessary. But I wanted to take Daniel's comments on board. So of course, ultimately, it's the decision of the group. So yep. Exactly. I don't care.
Okay. Well, if I don't hear anybody speaking up, then we will do nothing with this one and let the chairs confirm that there is consensus to just close it. Tier has been the person that's been closing stuff as he verifies that he agrees that there's consensus. So.
Yeah, I thought I saw him close it, but yeah, I mean.
Okay. Maybe you did already. I don't think so.
Yeah.
All right. So that's it on this document.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just move forward.
Okay. And I only have one slide on the next document, which is the transport document. I'll wait till Nancy puts that one up. As the transport document was also submitted to the IESG on Monday, I think. This one also went through working group last call, then went through additional reviews after that. And the only changes since IETF 110, okay, which is when things were already ready to go to the IESG, but we were waiting to see if there was going to be any changes based on implementation experience. There has not been. expert review caught that the document incorrectly said intended status informational, which was never the intent, so we fixed that. And then the other one was a clarity that the title of the document arguably did not match the abstract or the introduction. Both of the abstract and the introduction are clear that this document is about when agents initiate communication to a TAM. In other words, the HTTP client is on the agent side, whereas the old title could have been interpreted as being, this only talks about messages that go between the agent and the TAM, regardless of who initiated them. And that's certainly the wrong interpretation, right? So we just updated the title to match the abstract and the introduction. So other than that, no changes to the document, and it was submitted. So now, of course, this is submitted, but it has internally a normative reference to the Teep protocol, which is not. So eventually this will be blocked on normative dependency until Teep protocol is submitted. But this was submitted to ISG already. So.
Well, hopefully there won't be any modifications. It's just waiting for the protocol.
Yeah, exactly. It'll sit there until the normative reference is resolved,
Yep.
correct?
Yep. All right.
Okay, any questions on either of those two documents? If not, then I will get out of the queue because I think Akira is after me.
Yes. Akira, you want to share or you want me to share?
Just let me try.
Oh,
Let me try sharing.
okay.
Yeah, do you mind sharing my slide?
Yeah, I actually did not see them on the data tracker. I thought Fido
Oh,
had
really?
preloaded them.
Oh, now I see it. I just is it shared?
Yes, I see them.
Yes. So this is a hackathon report, and it was happened last week in Japan time, 5 o'clock afternoon, and it was burden for Dave Taylor. Yeah. So thank you for joining from midnight. After midnight, I think it was 1 or 2 a.m. Yes, and we just after the IETF one last IETF, we started to implement the suit manifest inside the Teep protocol. Before that, we only had Teep protocol format in the Teep message, and we just wanted to proceed making the implementation improvement and started at suit manifest. And so these are the thing we did it for the hackathon, matching terminology between Teep and suit draft, and what we want to do in Teep use cases for the suit manifest. And we came up with 3 candidates of the suit manifest. And then from the candidate, we tried to create the format of the suit manifest. Oops. So this is the Teep terminology and suit terminology, and Teep in blue and suit in green. So app developer is author and a suit, and that's the we'll be generating the suit manifest, the initial suit manifest, and the suit manifest, and including trusted application or firmware will be hosted to the server, and where to host it is depend on the use cases. But in this use cases, we thought is uploaded to firmware equal is TC, and Teep is at the App Store, not apps. I'm sorry, in TAM, and untrusted client to the App Store, and both is in the suit terminology is firmware server. So yes, this is the our use cases for our hackathon. And the challenge was in the GitHub number issue 104 and 105, and initial suit manifest is will be generated by TC developer or author, and however the manifest could be in firmware could be hosted to TAM or different URI. For example, the manifest is developed by application vendor and could be hosted to some mobile operator app store, or they might be hosting a third-party hosting server or using CDN. So inside the suit manifest, there's a place to specify a URI. It could be different from the initial TC developer when it's uploaded to TAM. And how to make the manifest was what we tried to do during the hackathon. So we came up with 3 manifests: number 1, number 2, number 3. And number 1 and number 2 using dependency. The reason is when we discussed this item at last IETF, the consensus was using a dependency, and there's a pros and cons. There will be 2 signatures from author and the TAM, so we could verify the signatures from both entities. And I'm going to talk about the cons in the next pages. So first one, just using dependency. So this manifest number 1 is something we didn't proceed, but basically it has two manifests. One is on the left side is the initial manifest generated by TC developer or author. When the TAM is going to host it, they reference to the original manifest on the left side as using with the dependencies, and the difficulty for this, not difficulty, but the issue for this was going to have 2 manifests for one TC or one firmware, which is not that ideal situation for our use cases. And another thing is if we have a left side of the manifest, and if we have one side of the manifest from the TAM inside the device, if the device started to parse the manifest on the right side of the manifest from the TAM, it will result able to read a different parameter of the URI. But if the device started to parse from the left side of the manifest first, and then it will finish parsing all manifests, but it won't catch the URI is specified in different manifests from the TAM. So it's not that easy for to implement in device. So we didn't use this. And this is the number 2 is the one we used. We decided to use is having integrated dependency, which means having original manifest from the TC developer inside the manifest generated by TAM embedded. So then this will have only one manifest. However, it will be original manifest from the TC developer will be encapsulated inside a manifest from the TAM. Yes. And okay, and this is the last one. this is doable, which is if the TAM and TAM and the TC developer both trust each other, so it will rewrite the contents of the parameter UI from the TC developer when the TAM is going to host the manifest in firmware, which is possible if they, but if the both entity trust each other. But we didn't go through this. We decided not try to use number 2, so we could or verify the signature from both TAM and author. And then this is the requirements for making the format for the number 2 design. So suit manifest generated by TC developer. This is the initial manifest generated, and it has an install command sequence. And then the suit manifest will be encapsulating the first manifest, and with a different, you also have an install command sequence, but have a different URI. And this is the format we came up, and this is where we need to discuss details with the people with the suit. And how much time I have? So
Dave gave you a bit more time, so you have like 7 minutes left.
7 minutes. Okay. Then let me go deep dive on the left side. So over here, is my mouse showing?
It is. Akira, you're
Okay.
taking questions. Brendan's in the queue.
Okay. Yes. How do I need to do something on the?
No, we just need to recognize Brendan. Go ahead, Brendan.
Hi, Brendan Morin. My question is about one of the things you said earlier. You said that it wasn't great to have 2 separate manifests. I guess the question I have is, if you are dealing with a TAM and a TC developer, and they are 2 separate trusted entities, and they have different trusted, they're trusted for different things. I'd like to know how you get away from having multiple signatures, and secondly, if they're using different metadata, how would you get away from them not separately authenticating that metadata? Those, if they're different trust domains need different signatures, and you have to trust the origin of the metadata. So I'm just curious if there's a way that you have to get around that.
Not at the moment is my answer, but yes. So we talk about the if we have to. Initially, we wasn't sure if one TC or firmware should have 2 different manifests. And from the comment during the hackathon from Brendan, yes, it might be not the best way to have 2 separate manifests for one TC or one firmware. So yes. Is my answer okay for your question?
I'm not sure what I should include in the meeting minutes. Is there a conclusion there as well? Like what? Yeah.
Brendan, did you have a specific question? Hannes is trying to capture it in the minutes.
Yes, so my question was, it was a clarifying question to start with. You said that it was not ideal to have more than one manifest. And so my question was, is there a better way to do it? given that you have two different trust domains and you have to separately authenticate two different pieces of metadata from those two different trust domains. So if there's a way to do that without two manifests, I'd love to hear about it.
Clear, easy answer is no. So
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we got it. Yeah.
Thanks, Hannes.
okay. In this page, we were trying to figure out how to write the design for number 2 in the format, suit manifest format, and this is just we need to discuss with the suit working group, and we in our very tentative very draft format is having the initial manifest TC coming first in the format, and then having as an integrated dependency key, and then in the bottom is the manifest TAM format, and then it's the only difference is having a different URI than the initial initial manifest from TC. So initial manifest from TC had http://example.com hello.txt, and from the manifest from the TAM is have a URI have http tam.example.com hello.txt, and we just in this the draft format we made this manifest TC coming first is when the parsing in the device side, when the manifest when the device is parsing the manifest TAM, they already knew they have read the manifest TC first, so it will be easier for the device side to parse it. But I'm not sure this is the right way, or we just maybe this topic could be the tomorrow tip session. Okay, and summary is.
I have a note which I'm adding to the meeting minutes. Is I think so I was obviously in the discussion, so it's a little bit easier for me to understand. But for some of you who may not have been involved in those discussions, the starting point of why there are two manifests is because the author creates the original version, and then later on the DAM wants to change the location of the binary, and obviously he can't just change it because the manifest is digitally signed, which would obviously invalidate the signature. And so the question is, how can you securely do that? And that's why this example looks more sophisticated because of those two trust domains, as Brandon called them. I'll add that to the meeting minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, any more comments from anybody?
You need to start wrapping up, Akira.
Okay, this 1 minute more. Okay, it's a summary. So we mapped the terminology during the hackathon Teep and suit draft, which is which will be good slide for the implementing in the future, and came up with 3 different format, 3 design for the suit writing suit manifest, and we decided to use one of them, and try to come up with the format of the design we chose. And after IETF, this IETF, we would like to finish concrete the design of the format and finish the implementation and put the reference format in the Teep draft. And then in the future, we would like to start the ongoing to implement the code save feature. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Akira. Dave, you want me to run slides again?
Great, Nancy. Thank you. Thanks, Akira, for walking us through that. And the last point about still working on Suit Manifest, that's Brennan's presentation tomorrow we were talking about. So we'll come back to the Suit Manifest stuff tomorrow. So I'm going to talk about the changes in the Teep protocol and then walk through a number of the issues that were filed during the hackathon last week. So next slide, please. Okay, so let's start with the ones that were previously discussed at IETF, and then we put what we believe is the working group's intent from past IETFs into the document. And so this is just to confirm that we got it right. But my hope is that there's not necessarily open questions on the first 5 in terms of the intent, but and then hopefully we got it right and then we match the intent. So, and then we got a bunch to go through after that. And I'll go until the end of the session and then continue tomorrow. And so we can stop in between any particular pair of issues when we run out of time. And so that means it's fine to discuss any particular issue that people have comments or questions on, because we will not get to the end of this presentation today, guaranteed. There's enough to cover today and part of tomorrow. So next slide, let's start going through these. So the first ones, my hope is they should be more easy than the open questions. So the first one in previous IETF, I think it was last IETF, not the one before, we talked about dependency resolution being done by the Teep agent at least in some cases. And so this is just a note that the sending of the update message and the response to it, which is a success or an error, there might be a significant time delay between those, depending on how long the update process actually takes. And so just a note for, say, those doing a TAM implementation, that if you're using nonces, right, you don't have to use nonces, but if you're using a nonce-based freshness mechanism, you might have to store that nonce for some period of time until you could actually get that, given that it's not going to be, immediate necessarily in all cases. So this is just, it's important to note that it might be delayed. So this is the text we have in the document right now. So unless there's any questions, we can keep going on. But again, if you want to discuss, please get in the queue, and happy to spend as much time as we need on things to get things fixed up. So, all right, I see David is in the queue. Yeah.
I wanted to point out that when you mentioned having to store things, we do have to do that in MCU boot during updates. So to confirm real application of having to store specifically nonces.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, let's go on to the next slide then, if there's nobody else getting in queue. I take your comment, David, as being, yep, there's cases in the real world in MCU boot where this happens and so on. So let me know if I got that wrong. But let's go on to the next slide, Nancy, on to slide 4 or whatever.
Yeah, sorry,
Okay,
my thing's a little slow.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the next one was, we did talk about this last IETF, where we talk about what happens when you parse a query request and it doesn't, all the fields aren't quite what you expect. Can you send an error message? And we all agreed that yes, we should. That was the resolution from the minutes from last time. And the previous state of the spec was that it was contradictory, that section 3 already explicitly allowed that case, and section 6.1 and 6.2 were the parts that didn't. So in other words, we had both answers before they contradicted each other. So based on the past resolution that says, yes, you can send an error in response to an query request, we did not touch section 3, but we touched section 6.1 and 6.2 to clarify that it was now allowed. So as an example, the part in bold there was text that was added before the latest draft. The part in bold was absent, and it just ended with a period there, right? So now query response, if all were understood, or an error if any was encountered. So that sentence and then a similar one in the other section. So we think we got that. That one was pretty easy to address based on the discussion last time. So unless there's any questions, let's go on to the next one. Okay, so we had an open question last time that we had a tentative resolution according to the minutes, which was Russ had asked, should we allow or disallow future Cypher suites without confidentiality? In other words, if it's going to be, say, expert review, what would we tell the expert to expect here? And so last time, the minutes, basically, we concluded from the meeting that if you do it, it better come with appropriate use case, security considerations and applicability, but maybe we don't want to rule it out. At least we didn't have consensus to rule it out. We just had consensus to maybe allow it, but only if it comes with, appropriate considerations. So this is the text here where the main point is the bolded part, which is any ones without confidentiality protection can only be added if the associated specification includes a discussion of security considerations and applicability. Says manifest may carry sensitive information. And then we have an example of a case where, to make it clear that there might be some case where you want to allow it because you're handling it differently, you're not passing anything or whatever. That's just up to the specification to have. So the main change is, the main answer to the question is the part in bold there. Okay. Seeing nobody in queue. Let's go on to the next slide. I'm not watching chat. I'm just watching the queue. And I see Russ said, thanks. I just checked the chat. Okay. All right. Next one was about challenge versus token in the query request. And so last IETF had this discussion about, well, both of these are kind of providing values that get echoed back from the Teep, from the device in different messages. Should we combine the fields or not? And I think Ben had a convincing argument that, don't convolute things if they're meant to be separate. If they have separate, syntaxes are meant for separate messages. So the ending consensus of the meeting was to keep them as separate fields. And so challenge is what you echo back inside claims in the evidence. Token is for what you echo back in a Teep response. Okay. So those were kept as separate fields in the query request to be echoed back in different things. But it's clear that those are for disjoint use cases, right? You'd never include both the token and the challenge in the same query request, right? So you include the token if and only if the attestation bit in the query request is clear, and the challenge must be absent if the attestation bit is clear. So it's not legal to ever have a query request that has both a token and a challenge because they're for disjoint cases, bit on, bit off. Now you see if and only if in the first case, but only an if in the second case for challenge, and that's because it is legal to have a query request that has neither a token nor a challenge. And of course, this would be the case if the attestation bit is set and you're using some mechanism that's not a nonce, right? So you're using like timestamps or epoch IDs or something, and there's no other reason that the challenge is needed, right? This just illustrates the challenge field there is not just for carrying a nonce to be put into, say, attestation or something. You could put other information into the challenge that needs to be used to generate the actual evidence, right? If you're generating evidence that's meant for a specific entity as opposed to arbitrary entities, you might use the challenge to do that, okay? And so it's legal to have neither if you have no reason to have a challenge and you're doing attestation. And so this would not be the case if you're using nonces, but might be the case if you're using timestamps or epoch IDs, okay? And so that's just a long explanation as to why the text that's quoted there in the first two bullets is worded the way it is. Okay, and again, my belief is this reflects working group consensus from last meeting. So, all right, next slide. Okay, so we had a long discussion last IETF about, this is part of the RATS tutorial for Teep folks and so on. And so we talked about the different freshness mechanisms that are talked about, categories of mechanism that are in the Teep and the RATS architecture, being nonces, timestamps, and epoch IDs. And we said, should the Teep protocol constrain the choice of freshness mechanism, or should it allow multiple ones? And the tentative consensus from last meeting is that we should try to allow multiple of them and not constrain it, okay? To say, well, that's really up to the whatever your attestation protocol is doing, and we don't want to force you to use a particular one, was kind of how it was phrased last time. And so this was the intent, and so this one, if I got something wrong, it'd be somewhere in this one here. It says the intent is to add a freshness mechanism negotiation, at least that was my interpretation of the consensus. And so what I did here is I took the existing negotiation mechanism that's used for cipher suites, okay, where that is basically that the TAM can put a list of supported ones in the query request, and the device can then choose among those, and if it doesn't support any of those, then it can send an error with the ones that the device supports, right? That's what we do for cipher suites right now. And so the here for freshness mechanisms, we try to use that as a precedent and do it the same way. And so we already had an IANA registry section for creation of cipher suites. And so I added an equivalent IANA registry for freshness mechanisms. And here there's only 3, and there might only ever be 3, but just in case, there's 3 that's here, being nonces, timestamps, and epoch IDs. And the table isn't in there. The description is basically taking text that's below the table that's in the table and putting it into a table form in the slide here. And so there you can see what the draft says about, what does nonce mean, okay? It means that you've got to include a nonce in the challenge and so on. So it has to do with what claims you'd be using in evidence and so on. And so this is just saying that Teep could be used to be with any of these 3. And let's go on to slide 2 for this one. And so just like in the cipher suite negotiation, the query request, you can add supported freshness mechanisms. And so again, this is an optional field, just like it is in cipher suites. And if it's absent, it means the same thing as if you included it with only nonce as the freshness mechanism. And so that's what happens in the query request. And so that's the set that the device can pick from. And if it doesn't like any of those, then it can generate an error message, and the error message can include its list of supported freshness mechanisms. So let's say you have a device that was a constrained device and it only implemented, epoch IDs or something like that, right? So the query request comes in from the TAM, it says nonce, and it says, no, I can't support nonce. Can you give me epoch IDs? And the TAM can choose to log that, or it could choose to, fail over and say, okay, epoch IDs or whatever else it wants to do, implementation detail, okay? The main point is you can at least log it, okay? Now, this one has a sentence that's in bold there that there's a different issue that's filed on that I'm going to come back to because the argument is that sentence is incorrect. So if you want to comment on that, hold your thought because I'm commenting on it myself in 2 slides or 3. What it currently says is if the error message does not mention what supported freshness mechanisms the device has, and that also means that it's only the nonce, okay? There is a problem with that statement that I'll come back to, but that's what's in the document right now is what I've just presented. So, all right, let's go on to the next slide then, because I don't see anybody in queue. And so that covers the things that are already addressed in the current draft. Now we're going to move into the new issues filed, and I think all of these are ones that were raised during the hackathon itself. Okay, so that's the list that we're going to walk through one by one. I've sorted these so I can talk about what I just said I was going to come back to first. So next. See, hackathon was productive. We found a bunch of implementation issues. All right. So here's the issue with the sentence that I referred to. Okay, so you send off a query request and you get back an error, and the error has nothing about freshness mechanisms in it. Okay, and so what do you conclude? Okay, that's the second bullet on here, which is, does absent mean that it only supports nonce, or does absent mean that, well, it may not have hit a freshness mechanism problem? Okay, the issue is that if you fail due to there's no mechanism in common, what error code do you include? There is no error code. We had an error code for, no cipher suite in common. But when we added the issue 142, we forgot to add an error code for this. So I said we tried to use the cipher suite stuff as a precedent, but we messed it up because we didn't put in an equivalent error code to make it match. And so that's what issue 143 is oops, we forgot the error code. The proposed resolution is same thing for cipher suites. We add an error code that says unsupported freshness mechanisms, and change the statement to say the supported freshness mechanisms field in the error must be returned if you set the error code to freshness mechanisms. And that's the type of statement we use in the cipher suite negotiation today. So this was an intent that was discovered when trying to implement that new stuff that says, oops, we can't implement it. There's no error code to put in my code here. And so my belief is with this one, with that proposed resolution, then it would actually match the original intent and work just like cipher suite ones. Okay. Silence equals consent. So let's go on to the next one.
Sorry, I realized I was on mute. Wasn't sure if Hannes had a question, and I
Okay.
don't know which slide it was in. What do the nonces and MC boot do? That might have been a couple slides back.
Well,
That might be a question for David.
Yeah, that was more a discussion on the on the chat, not to Dave.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry.
I think that was in response to David Brown's comment at the mic.
Yeah. My bad.
No problem. I'm curious. Yeah.
David, you want to take the question?
Yeah, specifically what the nonces that were being stored across encrypted updates. It's basically if there is a bad power down or if power is lost in the process, we need to have the nonce around in order to be able to continue with the decryption.
Once you resume power, you continue where you left off with the stored nonce?
Correct.
Okay.
There's actually a stored nonce and a stored key even. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's would be yet another nonce that is not that's different from that nonce.
It is, yes. I mean, I wasn't. My point wasn't that it was exactly the same scenario, but that storing that kind of thing is something that's needed in another situation.
Yep. Makes sense.
Okay. So going on to issue 144, use of the challenge when the freshness mechanism is not nonce. This one is a simple editorial oversight that was discovered during implementation. What the text says right now is that if you have a challenge in your query response, then you must copy it into the nonce claim found in the EAT. Well, of course, if you've just negotiated the fact that you're using timestamps or epoch IDs, then of course this sentence is wrong. And so the proposed resolution is to just update the text to match the stuff we already covered, which is, as phrased, that only applies if you've negotiated nonces, right? If you've negotiated something else, then you might use the challenge for whatever the attestation protocol uses it for. It's not for nonces, but it might be to, identify the intended destination to encrypt with, or whatever it is that the attestation mechanism uses. So you have to fix that text. You can see there's not proposed replacement text here, only that it's obvious that this text here is incorrect because it only applies if you negotiated nonce. So is the mechanism used. So we'll have to figure out what the appropriate rephrasing is to resolve this issue. But this is it's gone during the hackathon when trying to implement that sentence. So, all right, next slide, unless I see somebody get in the queue. All right, handling of the suit commands bit and data item requested. So as a reminder, the query request can come with this set of bits that says, here's the information I would like in your query response. Okay. One of those bits is the suit commands bit, and the description says the TAM queries the Teep agent for supported commands offered by the suit manifest implementation. That is the only mention of suit commands in the entire document. So there's no way to actually report that information in the query response. Okay, there's a way to request it, but there's no way to implement that bit to do anything with it. Okay, Brendan is in queue, so I will let you speak up. Go ahead.
So this is part of a generic capability discovery question. And it strikes me that what we really need here is something explicitly for capability discovery in suit. There are several different capabilities that probably need to be discoverable. The most obvious three are algorithms supported, the commands supported, and parameters supported, which may not be a one-to-one mapping with commands supported. So then there's also going to be an open question of whether for some devices you want the ability to report which component identifiers are supported. That's something that might be yes, might be no, and it's going to depend on the application quite a lot. I think that there's probably a need for a document that explains this, and that's probably something suit should do. But at the same time, it's going to be pretty trivial. I mean, the CDDL for it is going to be a list of 3 lists of integers or something to that effect. So this is something that we can do. We can do it pretty quickly. We can do it pretty easily. But I think honestly that that's how this should be handled. It really should be something related to generic capability discovery in suit.
Okay, don't go away. Let me present the rest of the slide and argue for option 1. And I'm expecting you may have a response to that, or a way to implement that, or a correction to something I'm going to say that's wrong. So, so the part of the question is, what would the TAM do with the information, right? Because as we just talked about in the Curious presentation, the TAM is not the entity that created the suit manifest. Okay, so it's not like it can change the suit manifest per se, right? Not normally. At least that was the discussion we were having as part of a Curious presentation. Okay, now the only thing I can imagine you'd use it for is if somehow the TAM had multiple versions of the suit manifest for the same component, and it would use it to decide which version of the manifest to send you. I've got 2 different blobs that are meant for 2 different things, right? But I could do that by paying attention to the attestation information that says, okay, well, you're out of compliance. Here's the different types of binaries that you'd need. I need to pass down the trusted component that's the correct suit parser for you, right? Because you don't have the correct one for me. And this one has a dependency on you having the correct suit parser as an implementation in your TEE. And so I can do that with a TAM by paying attention to what you have installed with what versions. So I don't need the suit commands bit to do that.
You are correct. I do have a response to that. May I jump in here?
Yeah, please. That's
Yes,
my leading question for you. So,
Brendan Moran at the mic. So the way that I would handle this is, if you do indeed have multiple versions of the suit parser, then what you need is a component identifier for the suit parser itself. And if you have a component identifier for the suit parser, then you need to have a class ID for your device, which includes that suit parser. Once you've got a class ID, you can match it against the appropriate suit manifest for the specific device, and you won't accidentally install it on the wrong one.
yes, exactly. And I'm saying once you do that, you no longer need a bit in the data item requested to request it, right? Because you're handling it with a different mechanism. You're doing it by negotiation based on what suit manifest component version and component ID do you have installed, not based on you reporting what's the set of suit commands it supports.
Yes, that seems reasonable. The case where you actually need to know which suit commands are supported is more along the lines of wanting the ability to construct personalization data for a device and needing to know exactly how to make sure that it's going to work.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that in the Teep use case, the thing that constructs the personalization data is not the TAM, right? And so it's like the wrong place to put it in the protocol is what I would argue. Right, you want the information to be conveyed back to the TA developer / author / suit manifest author / TA developer using Akira's green-blue terminology, right? Not the TAM.
Unless the TAM is actually constructing manifests, then
Right.
It doesn't need this.
Yeah. So that's why I'm going to argue that we remove the bit. If we ever have a case that something breaks that you can't do it, we can always add it in a future extension. Okay, that would be option number 1. As a workaround in the meantime, if somebody runs into it and needs it, then of course, when a failure happens, they're going to get suit reports saying unsupported command or whatever, and so you can always get it out of the suit reports in the meantime. So that's why my preference is to remove this bit. And if somebody cares about this use case, they're going to end up having to use suit reports until extension is defined. Any objections to that proposal? Because my interpretation of Brennan's comments is that that would be okay, but correct me if I'm misinterpreted, or if other people want to argue for a different option other than option 1.
I am happy with option 1. Brendan
Okay.
Moran again.
All right, thank you. Unless anyone else has a comment. Unless anybody else has a comment.
Kohei agrees. Akira agrees.
Okay,
So
great.
option
Sobe-san,
1.
thank you. Okay, great. Then that hears from a bunch of the implementers. So at least between me, okay, and Ned. All right, thank you. I see some
And
+1.
Ned agrees. Yep.
Okay, let's go on to the next one then, saying that sounds like it's consensus to me. We can confirm that on the list, but that sounds like direction, so.
Yep.
All right. next issue we ran into, and again, chairs, feel free to call time whenever you want, because we're not going to get through all the slides by intent.
Well, you got 5 minutes left, so if
Okay.
you can cover this one, we can call it done after this one.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So the next one is a little bit similar in terms of, half of it is in the spec, the other half is missing, and that is handling of extensions. Okay. So the question is, if you get in a query request, okay, and you don't support any extensions, but the query request has a bit set that says, please send me your list of extensions. Okay. And right now it's a bit ambiguous. It says, do you either omit the extension list from the query response because there's nothing for you to put in there, and that's fine, or do you say that it has to be present, in which case it would be an empty array? Okay. My proposal is, if you set the bit, you better have it in the response, even if it's empty. It should be an empty array in that case. And my rationale is that's how Cipher Suite negotiation works, is if the bit is set, it's mandatory to be in there. Now, of course, it's not going to be empty in that case, so this one is a little bit different. But the point is, if you set the bit in the request, you better have the field in the response. It's mandatory. And so we did this in Cipher Suite negotiation. We found that in freshness negotiation, doesn't mean that it has to be absent if the bit is clear, but if the bit is set, it has to be present. So that's why I would propose we do the same thing here that says, if you see that bit in the query request and you don't put it in the query response, you are non-compliant. Any objections from implementers? Because I tried to implement an extension negotiation when I don't implement any extensions. Okay, consistency sounds good. Thank you, Hannes. Okay, if I hear no objections, then I will try to go forward with this one.
Okay.
And that means we can probably cover one more slide in the last 4 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's go for one more.
Okay. All right. Next one that's underspecified is OCSP capability discovery. So similar to the one we talked about 2 slides back, the text says, a TAM can query the Teep agent for the support of the functionality via the capability discovery exchange as described above. That's it. Okay. Doesn't say anything else about OCSP capability discovery anywhere else in the document. Nothing says how to report that in the query response. There's not even any bit in the data item requested to query for it, unlike the other ones. There's just a statement that says you can do it, and then there's no way to actually query it, let alone report it. So again, same question here. Should we remove the sentence, or do we need to specify a negotiation mechanism? And this one, I don't have a preference between. So opening it to comments. Okay, Akira, option 1, okay.
Yeah.
I've not tried to implement any OCSP stuff right now, so I'd love to hear from somebody trying to implement OCSP.
Go ahead, Ming.
Yeah, hey, this is me. So I think we all along we do want to support OCSP somewhere, right? Or we just say because the device has no way, or we don't want device to correlate with their server can trust, right? Then when it get over, it should have capability to do OCSP check. If not, there's some way need to tell, right? So I think we should have a way to do this. I know there's a limitation for the moment, but as a protocol functionality, I think we should support OCSP,
Okay.
or if not, need to tell.
Let's. I've got Ben and Russ on the queue. So Ben, you want to go next?
Yes. So I guess my question is about future extensibility, basically. So if we took option 1 for now, and we said nothing about OCSP in the core document, what would we have to do to add a negotiation mechanism for OCSP support in the future?
Good question. I guess another option we could take is to say make OCSP mandatory, right? Which wouldn't need a negotiation mechanism, but that would be maybe an option 3.
Yeah, that also occurred to me. If I didn't mention it.
Well, so Hannes actually put the question, but OTRP is still relatively new, I think. He's put the question that OTRP actually has OCSP support, but he's putting the question is anybody actually using it, right?
So I think Ming wanted to jump in, and then I want to hear from Russ after.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just
Go
want yes, I just said right. I said that as a mandatory option 3, I would agree with that one. We could make it mandatory because the OCSP has been out for long, right? Well, capability-wise, for a device to support, unless a legacy device, I think it may not be really such a strong requirement. I would explore that option 3 because it's really signature check stuff.
Makes sense. Russ?
I was going to advocate an approach similar to what TLS is doing with stapling. Just make sure it's included in the message as it goes across. And you could do something similar to CMS, which allows either OCSP or a CRL, but there's many environments you do not want the whole CRL being shoved across there.
Yeah.
I think that's an argument for definitely doing negotiation then, because you might want to do something else or not OCSP, right? If I understood right.
Hannes?
Okay, so I noticed we're over time, so I don't know how long you want to let the queue run, or if we want to pick this up and continue this discussion tomorrow, or what. So I do saw that.
Yeah, I lost. It just ticked. So let's continue it so that you get proper guidance for this one tomorrow.
Okay,
So
yeah,
we'll
so we'll
on
start from the
slide
same
14.
slide, and we'll kick off the same discussion tomorrow then.
Okay.
All right,
Thanks,
cool.
everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks a lot.